when did you start teaching at Ohio State?
It was around 2019-ish. I can't remember specifically, but September, the fall 2019, a relationship from Nationwide called me up. They needed somebody. They needed somebody to teach data governance to a master's program. He remembered me, and he and I connected, and it kind of took its own course from there. So 2019, and I'm still doing it today. I took a little pause. We've restructured how the program operates, so my next class will start up here in the fall.
Okay, nice. And I mean, was the pause because of everything that's changed in the industry recently around AI, or the need now for, well, I mean, the data's been a focus for a long time, but it seems like it's even more so over the last 12 to 18 months, right?
So no, actually, and it's funny you mentioned that, because I am tweaking my course to account for AI, generative AI, and all those elements, and the importance of good, strong, quality data to make that happen. It purely shifted, and I love this though. The value that my course brings, it's nice if the students get a foundation of how data operates, and so they wanted to put them through more of the foundational courses of R, Python, use case development, and then once they have that foundational knowledge, I come in and start talking about, okay, you know how to do it. Here are some things that you need to keep in mind as you are doing it on managing the governance side of those things. The other thing that I love doing for my course, which is another reason they've backed me up until I'm now in the last cycle of the program. I have a lot of relationships with chief data officers across the country and data experts, and I really love to get those experts to come in. Usually we have 3 to 4 sessions or 3 to 4 classes where I have one of those leaders in there, and we talk about governance, we talk about data, we talk about analytics. We really give them a nice little grounding on what the real world looks like when they're done with this program. And so it ties in very, very nicely to the capstone projects that people are doing.
Okay. And is it in the computer science school, or is it in the business school, or?
Yeah, it's in the engineering. It's in the engineering program. And it's
Right.
it's called a Masters of Translational Data and Analytics, and I can provide all the content in detail. And it's actually something I'm very proud of, because I was there when it started, and then we've been starting to win some awards, and it's just kind of nice to be a part of it. I work with some great people that I get the opportunity to meet on a periodic basis. Obviously, I'm not a professional teacher. I didn't come up through those ranks, but I learned a lot from them. And it's been a great success, and it's been a great success for this program. The students that we get are all over the board. I've had everything from housewives that are looking to make a re-entry back into the job market. I've had engineers. So figuring out how to tailor the content to meet everybody's needs it's been one of the most exciting things that I've had the opportunity to do. So yeah, it's a great program. I'll send the details, and hopefully we can include it. I know my program administrator would love the opportunity to showcase this program to others that are out there.
No, I mean that's great, right? I mean, I honed in on that, right? Because it's always interesting, to have a career like yourself, like you've had, right? And then you get the opportunity after all these years of experience to go back, and I mean, you're teaching and educating every day, right? But you're with people that you're working with, right? But you get the opportunity, to teach and educate people who aren't in your industry and who you don't talk to every single day, right? So it's a whole different level of mentoring and coaching and, teaching that, just sounds interesting, sounds awesome, right? Sounds like it'd be pretty energizing, right?
It's probably, typically our classes last a semester. It's about 12 to 13 weeks. And it is probably one of the most exciting 12 to 13 weeks. And if you want to ever see or determine if you know content, you really know content and subject matter, the best thing you can do is then try to teach it to people that really have no experience with it. And I've been having a blast. I've had people come up to me in companies that they ended up landing jobs after the course. So it wasn't data governance specific, but after they finished the program, they've landed jobs at companies locally, and they'll come up and say, "Hey, I took your data governance class. One of the best experiences I've ever had." And I'm just sitting there going, "Oh my God, I love this." I mean, talk about satisfaction and fulfillment, and something we should all strive for. If you have the opportunity to step in an education world and help students and coach them and answer their questions and see that the knowledge and the learnings and the experience you have is valuable. It's fun. It's been the best experience, and I've loved every minute of it.
That's awesome.
The,
No, that's great.
the one thing I would say that I still am not good at when it comes to teaching, especially at university, the technologies there. I mean, they're specific to the teaching community. So I constantly am asking these stupid questions. How do I do this? How do I make this available? How do I do not content, but it's like I don't know all of this admin, and I've got multiple email addresses. So staying on top of, they finally have started realizing just send it to his personal and his work. He'll get it then, and so it works out much better that way. But that's the only pain point that I've had, and they work with me and are saints with helping me through the questions that I bring to the table.
Yeah, I mean, I can imagine. One of the things that's always was interesting for a consultant, right? And I at times had like one client, so you always kind of just 90% of your environment technology was with the client, but then I started bouncing around to different clients. And so you get to the point where it's like, I mean, it takes hours just to get on the Wi-Fi, right? And everything, right? And even at home, right, I experienced these challenges where my kids are like, "Hey, I'm having a problem with this and that." I'm like, they're like, "Aren't you the technology guy? Like, can't you figure this out?" And I'm like, "Guys, like,
Uh,
no."
I'm not that technology. I'm not that guy. I'm not that technology guy.
Yeah, I'm not
Yeah.
help desk.
It sounds like you and I live similar lives because I get the same question and I'm like, huh, yeah, that's not me. But you work in
Yeah,
technology. Not this type.
yeah. It was even worse when COVID happened, right? Like, why is the internet so slow, Dad? I don't know, right? Like, because everybody's at home watching Netflix and no one's, no one's working right
Uh,
now. So,
oh yeah. Well, I could not agree with you more. And I still get those questions, and I'll still get my kids calling me on, "Hey, I'm having this problem." Yeah, I'm not your guy.
yeah,
You're,
I'm not the right guy. Go
yeah.
Google. That's what Google's for. Or that's what ChatGPT is for now, right?
Well, once again, another exciting space. ChatGPT. Talk about unknown transformation. I mean, yes, it's great. Still a lot of unknowns on how we operationalize that going
Yeah,
forward.
and I don't. I mean, it sounds like, right. I mean, in your career, you were probably. It sounds like you were in the data, and you've been in there for at least the last 15 plus years, right? And I remember kind of the hype of AI in like 2016, 2017 timeframe. I actually helped deliver and implement at a large telecom virtual agents across, the chat platform, right? Where we were able to virtualize around 80% of the use cases that were out there. It's still out there today. And I just remember the hype then, and I even jumped on the hype wagon then, right? I was like, "Oh yeah, blockchain, it's all going to change the world," right? And then all of a sudden, like in 2019, it just seemed to kind of pause, right? Or, it stalled. And I even remember insurance cases, right, where you could file a claim, or you could, it could read the email that you submitted and automatically respond back and look at all the different data, and analyze the question and everything as well, right? And I mean, are you seeing something similar? I mean, first of all, do you remember that time,
Oh
right, when it
yeah.
was such a big hype, right?
Well, and I'll speak specifically to blockchain because in blockchain, the hype that we went through, or the insurance industry, at least from where I was sitting at Nationwide, a lot of interest in seeing how blockchain could change the way we do or handle insurance. And they were finding some isolated use cases, but it wasn't like game changer. It wasn't something that you sat there and go, wow, you leveraged blockchain and it did X. Now, there may be those situations out there that I'm not familiar with, but they were taking steps like setting up governing bodies, setting up communities across the industry, and it just seemed like everybody was trying to figure out how do we incorporate this in our day to day, and it just never kind of came. It never really felt like it came to that aha moment where here's the magic. We have figured it out, and here's the value that's there. It's still around isolated use cases, but yeah, it was a lot of hype, and it's kind of diminished over the course of time. And Gen AI seems to be the same type of, a lot of hype, a lot of possible opportunities, but getting it to the real world and getting it to an operational state, it seems like it's, people are starting to realize it's not as easy as you would think. It's not a silver bullet, a magic button. There's work that needs to be done, and it feels like we're just starting to realize the amount of work that's going to take to make something like this production ready, for lack of a better word. Now, where I do see some opportunity, and I this is Mark's personal opinion, new associates. I think new associates that don't have experience, as opposed to trying to rely on a mentor to help coach them and help guide them, especially, I'll use developer as one example. Hey, I need to know, how do I build this type of code to do this type of join, or this type of, it does an excellent job helping somebody new in that space, get a starting point for the code creation. Great opportunity. I think there's a lot, or a wealth of opportunities that will exist in that space. But I think the more experienced people, I don't know if they will see as much value out of the gate in those generative AI models going forward.
Yeah, and I haven't played around too much with Copilot, but I do, talk to some friends that are, developers, and, they, to your point, right? I mean, they love Copilot, like to the point where it creeps them out a little bit, right? It's like they start typing, and all of a sudden it's like writing all the code for them. And again, I don't want to speak too far ahead because I haven't actually experienced it, but they feel like it's like in their head a little bit too much, almost like when, you're talking to a buddy at lunch about like a topic, and then you go to your phone, and an hour later that topic pops up on your news feed, right? It's like it creeps them out a little bit, right? And that's pretty cool, right? And I was using ChatGPT last night to help me with a problem I was having with one of my Linux servers, and it gives me the whole command and everything. I think the experience is amazing. It's so much better than it used to be. But the challenges seem to still exist from 2016 to 2017, 2018, and now you've still got to look at the data and make sure you're training it with the right data, right? Like, I mean, companies that are your size, and my old, company at Accenture, there's so much historical data there with content around PowerPoints or Word documents that is outdated. Like, how do you know? I mean, that's got to be a good piece of your role, is making sure you're training the future of your AI. If you go down that path with generative AI, how do you know you're training with the right information? I mean, that seems to be,
and that's the $1 million question. And where I do see, one of the things I think ChatGPT will bring to organizations going forward, a lot of folks look at things like, this is a new capability, generative AI, it's a new thing. If you want to get to a point where there's meaningful output, you're going to have to look at your end-to-end process. What data did you capture? How are you capturing it? Is it accurate? Is it current? Is it the most up-to-date? And I think before you start doing the work in the model, you need to kind of check the box on the data that you're going to be leveraging and the processes that you have in place, because if you don't, you're going to have those problems that you've just described. It's not current. It's not relevant. It's not giving me the answers that are based on today's world, and it's only going to hurt adoption going forward if you don't get through that. So I think Gen AI, if you notice where it can have some potential for adding value, people need to start looking at the end-to-end process that it's going to be impacting, as opposed to just that, the generative AI component, the model, whatever you're going to be using. You need to look at everything from end to end and really look at it as a product. And I think that's where a lot of organizations, they see the capability. I want to enable that capability, but then they don't think about, well, how does this truly come back to the business? And if they don't do that, then they won't know if that data has the accuracy required to provide it, meaningful output.
Yeah, I mean, that totally makes sense too, right? I mean, one of the things when we were, developing use cases for virtual agents, what's the benefit of virtualizing a process that's pretty poor today with just what's the purpose, right? So when we actually took advantage of, look, if we're actually going to do this as a virtual agent, let's see if we can streamline the process, right? And there was an example use case. One of the use cases we had was phone swap, just swapping out an old phone for a new phone. And sometimes that would take, let's just say it takes 30 minutes. I don't remember the exact time frame. I do know how long it actually took with the virtual agent. It only took 2.5 minutes with the virtual agent. And part of that was because the response time, but also we streamlined the process, right? And we made the process better and faster. And so, we took a lot of the, headaches out. And so it was a much better experience for someone, right? Than waiting 30 minutes with someone who's live.
But a lot of that is non-technology specific
Exactly.
action. And I think that's where the hook, yes, we are at a transitional time. Yes, this is a neat capability, but we're still going to all have to go back, take a look at how we deliver and really find those efficiencies in our process in order to maximize that value of generative AI going forward. And, it kind of is a reminder, we should always be doing that. It's one of those things we should constantly be criticizing and evaluating our processes, constantly looking, how can I automate? How can I make it better? How can I eliminate steps? How can I streamline efficiencies? And I think ChatGPT is going to be one of those things that forces us to just, here's a really cool technology that can be very useful, but to do or be successful, let's take a look at how we deliver. And if, here are those opportunities that we want to act on, that we want to change. And I think that's going to be the nice thing. It's going to really change how we do work going forward. And yes, we will have some nice, cool capabilities to help us with the output from that work. So I'm excited, but thinking that generative AI is going to be that magic silver bullet, well, not quite. I'm not quite convinced at this point in time.
It almost feels like there's, we've made improvement, and then we're going to have to make even more improvement, right? It sounds like, right, and I probably don't follow it as much detail as I should, but, with, open AI and some of the announcements that are supposed to be coming, they're continuously making huge amounts of improvement, right, in their journey. So it'll be interesting for sure.
And the one thing that I would say it's very intriguing. I've just started seeing some of the detail. They're starting to talk about a store where people can upload their projects that they've been working on. Now that is that is a person's idea. That is somebody, taking it from concept to execution. I think that's going to be very interesting to see what are folks doing with some of these capabilities that might be leveraged. I think I'm intrigued by that store concept that they're going to be. I mean, it's almost similar to the Apple App Store, and look what happened there. I mean, it's got a life of its own, and it's been beneficial. I know I just downloaded a couple apps over the holidays. I think that storefront will be the next iteration on where we can potentially realize value in this space going forward. Yeah.
So, staying on a similar topic, right? When you're talking about training these types of models going forward, or even doing like advanced analytics, right? Or other things like that, and, applying machine learning to analytics, it seems like, over the years, data lakes became really popular, right? And you still hear about them today. And I got to be honest, it always made me nervous, right? A data lake, because you got all these data sources, everything's going into one location, right? And, how do you know if you've got customer information all over an enterprise, right? How do you know that's the single source of truth, right? What is a single source of truth? And it almost feels like people have taken a step back from data lakes, but I might be reading this incorrectly. I might have missed something where the data stays where it is, but when you need it, you pull it in. It's almost like a virtualized data source, and you provide your analytics and you look at it, or maybe you ingest it in a data lake, but you're not constantly feeding these huge data lakes. Do I have that right, or am I wrong on that?
I would say obviously data lakes have a lot of data in there. People have been building, they've been ingesting, they've been storing data in lakes for quite some time. So I think there's a valuable asset there. Now, I will say that valuable asset, has it been the best managed? Is it to a point where it's hard to get, if you're not careful and you just create a data lake without the right rigor around cataloging, around indexing, around documenting what you have in that lake, and have the foresight to say, I need folks to be able to get this data out of here, it's very tough. And you have that asset, you have that thing that you've built, but it's basically not a very user-friendly or not a value-oriented asset. I think there's a lot of value because there's been work in creating a data lake. There's a lot of opportunity to clean it up, catalog, and try to take advantage of what you've already started. I do think, though, data virtualization and some of the other capabilities, allowing folks to have the right tools to explore data on their own, self-service data prep tools, data wrangling, data discovery tools. I think that we're going to see, hey, let's leave it at the source for some of the data that's not been ingested in some of the lakes. Let's leverage the lakes. Let's see if we can have some self-service data prep solutions that allow for us to start joining some of those details. And when we get to an operationalization state where we're taking, we have a finished product, we know what we want to do, I think you are going to see some of that virtualization. And I know we're exploring some of those capabilities at Farmers, and we did it nationwide as well. And I do think that is going to be a shift. Do I think there's going to be large-scale data lakes? For some companies, it probably makes sense. For others that are maybe starting on the journey, it might not necessarily be the right direction for them into the future.
So if I understand correctly, I mean, you spent a good amount of time just cataloging the data, right? And
correct,
collecting the metadata so that, the business, right? I mean, on the business side, you're going to have someone who's going to come in and they're going to have some sort of AI or advanced analytics background, right? And they're not going to want to depend on you guys necessarily from the technology standpoint to put in a ticket that says, I need access to this data, right? Or where is this data, right? You want to be able to catalog it proactively and allow them to go explore that data on their own, and then bring in, and then maybe a ticket, I'm missing something because you haven't gotten to it yet. But, you're constantly cataloging the data with metadata and tracking it and everything, right?
Yeah. The way I like to think of it is, me and my team and I, we're librarians. We are constantly making sure we have the inventory of books in a catalog, the Dewey Decimal, for those that have, that maybe aren't as advanced in age as myself. The Dewey Decimal System was the first data catalog that ever existed out there. It gave you the reference on where you could find it. It gave you the summary. It gave you the author. It gave you that basic information on an asset, a book in that case, that allowed you to see, is this something that I want to explore? It gave a nice little summary in most instances. that's the life of a data governance leader. You're the librarian for your company's data products, data assets. How do you capture all of that detail and information and make it available to those data scientists, to even some of the business users that are out there? If citizen data science continues to expand, I need to not just focus on the data science community, but I need to make sure everybody can understand what they're looking for. And we are focused in on that. And it gets tough because within a company, just like in a library, you're constantly adding. We're constantly going through change. You're constantly bringing something new in. You're creating new assets, staying on top of that, and making sure that you're capturing that information, getting it into your technology, and then making it available. It's a steady state of work every single day, especially from a privacy perspective. I know you mentioned sensitive information, personal information. In today's environment, you don't want too much sprawl of sensitive and personal information. Us staying on top of that cataloging will help us make sure that we can be a signal on if there's a problem or if there's a concern or if there's something going on. As we mature our cataloging capabilities, we'll be able to, hopefully highlight those potential areas of interest for our privacy teams, our business teams, and our IT teams going forward.
So I know I was exposed to what is a GDPR, right, in Europe, probably 4 or 5 years ago. Maybe a little bit more, right? And that's obviously, I think the parent company of Farmers, right, is Zurich, right? So I know they deal with that on a regular basis. Has GDPR those types of regulations made it over to the U.S., right? Probably maybe not as strict, but I mean, to your point, sensitive information, you can't have my social security number all over the place because, that's going to be a nightmare, right, to manage. Right?
Yeah, absolutely. And a couple things. GDPR, as it stands in Europe, has not made its way verbatim over to the U.S. However, and this is one of the pain points. The states do set, and California has set and defined a regulation where Farmers is based, and there are some very rigorous standards around managing customer information. And it's nice because managing customer information is a utmost priority and should be a priority for any company doing business, but especially for Farmers, where we deal with customers in the way that we do, where it's a little bit challenging. Every state seems to have their own little nuanced GDPR program. Staying on top of all of those states and making sure that we are complying, that gets a little cumbersome, but it's still a top priority for us as we go forward. It would be nice to see, some federal legislation very similar to like a GDPR that applied consistently, but will it happen? Maybe. I know there's been discussion. Would I love it? Absolutely. But I also think that even if there were a federal, some states would take, they would still want to incorporate their thoughts around that. And they should. I mean, they know their constituents, they know their organizations. It's just, that's an area. It's always a tough area to engage in.
Yeah, at risk of getting too political, right, and turn this into a political podcast, but it's a political environment these days, right? So I know we could argue, or someone else will argue that the states have their rights and the federal rights and everything else. But I mean, that's got to be so hard for you guys. All the regulation, right, is got to be difficult for you guys to manage, right? I mean, that's just
it is. I mean, it is, and yes, there's merit on both sides. So I'm not saying one or the other. I know from a business perspective, it just makes it so much easier when you have one that gives a nice firm foundation versus 50 versions of something. And each one, quite honestly, that is an interesting insight. That's an interesting principle that you're wanting to enable. Can't we just make it everybody? Everybody, so that's the only difficulty. But it's part of doing business. It's what we do. We've got a great team out there staying on top of these legislative matters, and we're doing all the work we need to make sure we're compliant.
And, touching a little bit on the tooling, right? Because that always fascinates me, right? Because, in this age of automation and everything else, right? How much of the tooling really can help you, go explore and find data and help you try to proactively categorize it, catalog it, right? And maybe even help you with some of these policy controls and regulations, right? I mean, are there things out there today that, are pretty advanced, or is it, that's a gap in the market?
No, there are a number of different solutions that are out there today. I mean, I could name a litany of them. ASG, Oval Edge, who we do a lot of work with, Calibra, Informatica has a solution. All of these technologies have a lot of the capabilities that are needed to manage a complex environment. I think the key is you just got to pick one, and you got to pick one that resonates with your business and IT teams from a use perspective, which is what we went through. Did a lot of work figuring out, okay, what type of user interface, what type of search capabilities, what type of features really resonate with the folks that would be using it. We selected Oval Edge that really meets our needs. And from there, it's been a matter of just setting it up and making sure the technical pieces can connect into our ecosystem. I think that's where the rubber hits the road. That's where the work begins. And I think a lot of times folks underestimate the amount of time it takes. Companies make it sound like it's easy. Oh, you get this, you'll have this. It's easy. Snap of the fingers, it's going to be done. It takes work. It takes time. Maybe in the perfect world it's easy, but companies have practices that they've put in place that make it not so easy, and rightfully so. And you got to work through those. And any company that comes out there and says, "Oh, this is going to be the easiest thing you've ever done. You just have to take X, connect it to Y, and you're going to get run from that type of organization, because it is tough. It is hard work." And the best thing that you can have is somebody that's out there going, you know what, it's going to be a tough one, but I can tell you we're going to be with you during this journey, and we are going to help you, and we're going to give you the right resources. That is, when I hear that, that's a group that knows what this is going to be like. I want to work with that type of group, and I feel like we've got that type of partnership with our partner.
No, and that's great, right? And it kind of reminds me of two topics. One, that integration, right? I mean, it's connecting to a MySQL database or, a Postgres database is nothing like connecting to, well, I don't know if you have this, right? DB2 on the mainframe. Well, that'd be JDBC, but you've got like VSAM or QSAM or, file system data on the mainframe or, an AS400 server data sources, right? I mean, they're not the same, right? And, integrating into those is not easy, right? I mean, that's probably what you're talking about. Is it's not straightforward, and yeah.
No, and you've hit the nail right on the bucket. And trying to understand those technologies you have, and then connecting in, you got to be methodical. You got to be patient, and you got to be willing to collaborate with the various teams that will help you get it done. And thankfully, we've had some. We've got great relationships across the board, and we've been able to work through those difficulties as we continue on our journey.
Yeah, and the other thing I think about when it comes to tooling, right, is when I think about like software engineering, right, where I spend a lot of my time, and you hire or you're interviewing someone who's maybe, in the industry or coming into the industry for the first time right out of school or been there for 4 or 5 years, and they really love this technology, right? I mean, how much do you have to manage those expectations? I mean, it's to the point where they're interviewing me on what tools we use because they only want to work with those tools. They don't want to work with some of the legacy tools, right? Or products. They only want to work with the latest and greatest cool stuff, right? Is that something you have to think about in your role, or You're just lucky.
Oh gosh, I wish I was lucky, and I wish I could avoid that. But that space is evolving so quickly, and new things are coming in at a pace that I've never seen in my entire career. You know, I would even say that existing partners that add similar capabilities. We talked a little bit earlier about generative AI. It's amazing to hear how certain partners are starting to add generative AI capabilities into their software packages, and being able to control how those things are added in is a monumental task in and of itself. But yeah, we're constantly challenged with, hey, here's the latest and greatest. What do you think of this? And what we typically try to ground to is, where does it fit in the ecosystem? We've got a reference architecture. We've got components. What capability will this serve in our reference architecture? And do we already have something similar? We're really big on, if we have something that's close, can we make sure that can we do what this new capability, this new technology says within our existing environment? Can we make it work? Obviously, any sort of organization is challenged with managing expenses, and what you don't want to do is have some of these newer cutting edge things come in. If you have something relatively close, gets you 80% there, let's try this first, because that's going to be a more cost effective play for us. And I think more companies are going to go that route because of the expense pressures that everybody, especially in the financial service industry, expense pressures are they're out there. Inflation is high. So whatever we can do to try to leverage what we have today, as long as it's close enough, that's what we strive for going forward. Now, requires a lot of work. What do we have? You got to stay current on what you have within your organization. And does it have the capability? So you have to have at least a high level understanding of, what kind of services does it provide. But I would also say it's kind of fun, because you do get to see what's kind of leading out there as cutting edge. Okay, now let's go do some research on our internal product stack, and let's see what we have out there. So it makes for an exciting day as we go forward.
Yeah, I mean, the business case always has to be there, right? You got to, in your role, you've got to constantly balance that, right? How to keep your people happy, right? Because, you want to keep them happy, but at the same time, you've got to answer to the boss, right, around, how much you spent, right, and justify it. So,
and that's the key. I mean, if there is something new, and it is, obviously you're going to take an interest, you're going to want to see, but you got to go through the due diligence to make sure. It's a new thing, but we really have this new thing in this existing. You've got to make sure you're going through that due diligence, because if you don't, man alive, your expense structure can get lopsided if you don't have that right rigor before you bring something in.
No, that makes sense. Now, it would be a mistake for me if I didn't ask you some very specific insurance questions, right? Or get your view.
Away.
With 30 years of experience on the insurance side, right? And as a consumer of insurance,
which most people are, and which is why I love this industry. I honestly love it. I would have never thought 30 years ago I'd say, God, I really want to be in insurance, but I'm so glad I started the journey and have continued it thus far.
I find, in my role, like I said, in my previous role at Accenture, you bounced around, and I always found every industry so interesting as you got into the weeds trying to solve their problem. And I don't know if I could ever land on one, although I will tell you, payers insurance is fascinating to me. I think it's probably because of all the regulations and everything around it, that it's constantly changing, and the benefit it has on my life on a daily basis, right? But then insurance as a whole, and in banking, right? But, 30 years of insurance, like, where's the world going? You touched on this a little bit with generative AI, but as you kind of go through this continually enhancing data governance and improving, the visibility of your data to your business partners, like within, farmers, what do you see, like 2, 3, 5 years down the road? That yielding for you, right? What is some of those? Where's the industry going, I guess? And I'll leave it a little bit open ended so that you can maybe take me through that.
Yeah, yeah. And you know what? I think once again, I think we're at a pivot point within the insurance industry. You're seeing a lot, and I'll speak specifically. Property casualty is where I've spent the bulk of my time. You've got a lot of self-driving cars that are out there. You've got a lot of technologies to help minimize risk. So where I kind of see us going, I can see the P&C insurance market, maybe shifting a little bit from, hey, here's an auto policy. Well, if you have a self-driving car, is it really an auto policy or is it a product liability type? So you could see a shift of, is the auto insurance really the primary product, or is it a commercial insurance that affects or some sort of product liability? So you could see some of that pivot, or I should even say, you can see a lot of questions being asked. Well, where really is, or who is accountable for the risk in a self-driving car? That yes, right now I think it's still in the hands of a personal individual. But if it's self-driving and there's a problem, does that shift to more of a product liability claim? That's one thing that will be a very interesting question to see flush out and unfold over the next 10 years as self-driving cars. The second piece, with the amount of data available, the amount of information that's being created across third parties, we have a wealth of information that can help us understand risk a lot better. And so I do see us, not only are we going to understand risk better and better price policies for what risk they have, but I could also see, and once again, this gets into that more future forward, that AI, those chatbots. I could also see us taking that risk information and creating something that will allow customers to ask more about where their risks are so that they can take steps or actions proactively. So I think there's going to be a shift where we're going to help customers understand, here's some of the risks that you could be faced with. Here's some suggestions for things you may want to do. I think we'll get to a point where there's us being more proactive in helping customers manage risk. And if you think about insurance in general, what's the only type of interaction you have with your insurance company? You get a bill, not exactly the most pleasant of experiences. You're paying money, and you're making changes. So, is there a way for insurance companies that create an experience and provide something back to consumers? I think that's where we're going to start to see, hey, we've got all this data. We're assessing risk. We're identifying, why can't we help customers see where they can take steps to minimize their risk going forward? And I think that's going to be a fun, exciting time as we move into the future.
Yeah,
Sure.
go ahead. Yeah, go ahead. I was just going to say, I think that's very interesting, right? Because I just had to, I just inherited two cars, and as we prepared to sell them, or whatever, I just took them on and got, had to update my insurance policy, and I hadn't bought or taken on a new car, if you will, or insured a new car in probably 8 years, right? And I felt like I was learning again from scratch, right? Like, you kind of think about, she's asking me all these different questions, and I'm like, God, I almost need to go learn insurance again because, excuse me, I don't even understand some of these questions, right?
Well, and see, once again, you can if we can get this right, generative AI can really help if we are able to create a knowledge base with insurance data. Now, right now, it doesn't work too well because a lot of the documentation and detail are very technical. Getting back to what we've got to look at how we capture information, but that would be a great resource for individuals. What kind of products do I need for my 2020 Chevy Tahoe, as an example? You think of the power that somebody like, not touching insurance, but I have this generative AI model. Now I can ask this model what kinds of products I need to have on my car. I think that's where it will help individuals. What I don't like about the insurance industry as a whole is that we really don't have, a lot of your iPhone. you're interacting with that thing on a daily basis, or Android if you're an Android user, you're interacting with it. Insurance, you don't really interact much with the product itself unless you have a claim, unless you get a bill, and those aren't exactly the best of time. Now, you want to step in and deliver. Absolutely, you want to handle those claims with excellent service, but you don't want people having claims. Well, how can we get more engaged with the consumers so that they can make the product feel real to them versus just something there. One concept that I loved, or I'll even call it out. This was at Nationwide. They were trying to create these community offices where people could just come in and interact with Nationwide, as a product. Yes, it did have sales agents in there, but they were company employees, and it was just intended to be a community office where you could go learn about insurance, safe environment, non-pressure, no real sales activity. It had conference rooms, and so it was a nice experience that people could have with Nationwide if they chose to do that. And it was probably 15 years ago where they attempted these, and they got away from them. They weren't necessarily seeing the value. But then I look at Capital One, and I think of Capital One, the credit card. Now, granted, you use your card on a regular basis, but the Capital One Cafe is exactly what what Nationwide was attempting to do. And they figured it out. Let's put a coffee shop, let's put a snack shop. Anybody's welcome. You get perks if you're a Capital One customer, but let's put that in here and let people come in and experience Capital One. And I just think that is for me in this financial services space, I think that's one of the neatest experiences that I've seen created for a credit card company. Outside of reward points or anything of that nature, you get the opportunity to go into hey, I'm a Capital One customer. I can go into Capital One Cafe, and they do a great job marketing it on TV. I just think that's something that if we can figure out how to do that in the insurance space, would be I think a game changer for any company that's there. Now, Capital One, they're already starting down that path. Great concept. I think replicating it will be tough, but is there a way for something similar to occur with the insurance space? I would love to see that unfold.
And that's like upselling is probably the wrong word, right? I think there's probably a more elegant word, right? But taking the data, understanding where someone is in their journey of life, right? You could probably almost predict, hey, this person is, they just took on a house, right? It looks like they added, a spouse or a partner to the policy. Should we start looking at, what they're going to do with children and, other things, umbrella policies and everything else, right? I mean, that's got to be some of that analytics, and where data comes in is that target marketing. Maybe that's the better way to look at it, right? Or phrase it. I mean, are those some of the things and use cases you guys look at?
Yeah, we are definitely looking at those and going through a lot of work to figure out how we can identify where folks are on their journey. I will say one of the best experiences I've had, and once again, this is not something new. It's always been around. When I had my first kid, I'm not even going to say how long ago, but it's been a while. The local State Farm agent, and so we just got out of the hospital. We had our daughter at home. This package shows up within 3 days after we get home, and it was from our State Farm agency. Not that I was a customer, but they just sent it as a marketing opportunity, and it was a how-to book for new families. And I'm like, hey, how did they know this? Now I was working at Nationwide, and I obviously, if I'm with a company, I'm going to have their product, but I'm like, man alive. Number one, how did they know it? Number two, boy, if I ever am not with Nationwide, this company is going to be a really strong second, and this person is going to be a really strong candidate. I mean, it just hit it out of the park. The only disturbing thing is, how did they find out so quick? And granted, you can find it out in the papers, and you can find it out, but this was 18 to 20 years ago. How did they find it out so quick? And then what was the, what was his mentality in sending something? I thought it was just brilliant for that agent on being proactive.
Yeah, they've got like a spy in the maternity ward, like walking around and writing down everybody's name.
And I wish we didn't keep the book, but it wasn't a cheap book. I mean, it was probably 500 pages of it was hardbound. And so it was like, man, they get the marketing thing and they get the life journey, and I think we're exploring those types of activities as well. And with the amount of data available, I think you can get to those insights quicker. But once again, you want to be very, very mindful of privacy when you're doing those things.
Yeah, I mean it's I mean I know that like my parents, right? They're in their 70s. When they get something that's very specific to them, it almost freaks them out a little bit, right? Like, how do they have all this information? What did I sign up for? And they debate it for like a week, right? How do I get off this mailing list, right? Or whatever, right? It's so I don't know. Maybe my parents are a little bit more paranoid than others, but yeah, I just it makes it. I think it does if if you go too far, it makes people think, God, man, how do these companies have so much on me, right?
Yeah, yeah, yeah. But for us, this is we are in a generation where we see the potential. My mom and parents would be the same way. They would think, well, how on earth did this happen? For us, I think we know the possibility, the potential, and imagine what our kids are gonna, be tolerant. The future for them. That's the big question. What does it hold? What things hold in store for them, and what are they going to see in their lifetime that are going to creep us out? We're going to sit there and go, "Whoa, wait a minute. How do you know this?" And then our kids are going to be like, "Oh, they know this because X, Y, and Z," and it's just going to be a fascinating journey for all of us to be on.
No, 100%. And my 14-year-old, she just got her cell phone last year. I mean, she's signing up for everything, right? Like, I mean, she's got to have probably 100 emails every morning on what she should be buying, right?
Oh, it's overwhelming. How do they do it? I'm like, I'm hitting unsubscribe to everything so I don't get the overwhelmed with with the messages.
Yeah, no, that's 100% right. All right, so what am I missing, right? I mean, is there something else that I probably should have asked you, right? That is, something you deal with on a daily basis, or something that's always a challenge for you, or something you're also excited about that I didn't touch on that maybe you want to bring up and talk about.
You know what? The last item that I'm not saying I've dealt with it significantly from a farmer's perspective, but it is something that I constantly get questions on, and it's very similar to the political discussion that we started off with, but different. What's the impact AI will have on employees? You're gonna eliminate employees through, and I sit there and I'm like, you can say that could potentially happen. Yes, absolutely, there could be that potential. However, if you start to look at the capability itself, and I've read this example, and it's funny. I read it in a book called Radically Human. I have it over here. And you mentioned Accenture early on. Accenture was one of the companies that kind of sponsored this book, and they gave a really good grounding statement that I sit there and anytime says, "Oh, it's the AI is going to take away jobs." I'm like, okay, put this in perspective. We don't have driverless cars yet, and we are generating over 5.4 trillion miles of data related to drive a vehicle. We can teach a 16-year-old kid how to drive and be successful at driving in about 40 hours. So if you think we are to a point where AI is going to take over jobs, just realize you can teach a kid something in 16 hours and we still haven't figured it out yet with all the data that we have for driverless cars. So if it does happen, it is not going to be for many years, and it's not going to be something where it's not going to be something that automatically, triggers some sort of mass layoff, but it is going to be a treasure trove of opportunity to learn more about how we can help contribute to that going forward. But it resonated with me because, I've gone through several kids driving, and I'm like, oh my God, yeah, 40 hours, and they're like turned over and ready to go, and we still don't have it figured out yet for driverless cars. Now they're making improvements, they're getting better, but that really hit me at home with, let's not look at it as, hey, it's going to adversely affect the job market. Let's look at it as there's going to be great opportunities for us to build new skills, and we're still not there where it's going to take over the world.
Yeah, that book, Radically Human, that's Paul Doherty, right? Was the yeah. So Paul, I worked for Paul for about 5 years at Accenture. Yeah. So and he was my sponsor for that AI telecom use case. Right. So he was the executive that helped me kind of implement that project, right, at that telecom client. Now, one thing I will say, though, around that, and I agree to your point, right? I mean, that's where AI, has not been able to take learnings from different parts of a topic or separate topics and apply them to a new topic, right? And so if you think about, all the driving you do with your kids to take them to soccer practices and everything else before they're 16, they're constantly learning along the way too, though, right? Even my 9-year-old, right? Someone had convinced my 9-year-old, if there's a white trim around the stop sign, it's a yield sign. That old saying, right? So my 9-year-old we talked about that. So now he gets that that's not a real thing, right? And then how do you, can you turn the right on the red? So they learn, it's not just at 16, right? It's that progressive learning along the way. But to your point, right? You can put a kid in a car, they go to safe driving school for 40 hours, and they were manipulating the wheel and everything else. And it's what they learned along the way that AI can't do, right? Because it's so new, right? It's still a baby, right? It's still a baby in comparison, right?
You are spot on. You are absolutely spot on. And there is that informal learning that AI will not necessarily, it's going to be the person that can figure out how do you incorporate the informal into the rigor. That's going to be when the magic starts to happen.
Yeah, and I'll tell you just one short story around the driverless cars. I was in Scottsdale for Christmas break or whatever, and my daughter wanted to go down to Tempe and walk around the ASU campus, and all of a sudden we're crossing the street, and one of the Waymo cars pulls up at the stoplight, and I'm like, wait a second, I've always wanted to ride in one of those cars, so I downloaded the Waymo app, and just filled it out with my Google account, and I was able to get a Waymo car like an Uber car within 5 minutes of me starting the app and everything. And it took me on I screwed up on my location. It actually almost took me to a police station. But I got to change the destination halfway through. It did a U-turn in the street and took me where I wanted to go. So it took me on like a 15-minute journey. And, my wife and I and my daughter in the car, and it was pretty seamless. It was pretty impressive, right? I got to say. But to your point, millions and millions and millions of miles and time and hours, and it has yet to even drive on the highway, right?
I agree. Well, and it's funny you and I seem to have similar interests because we're heading to Scottsdale this weekend. I will have to give it a go and see what the experience is.
Yeah, if you've never done it, I mean, it was interesting. Look left, and there's no one sitting next to you, right?
I've got to try it now. You've sparked my interest, so I appreciate that.
Yeah, that's really cool. Yeah, and that's always been, and even to your point, right? In 2016, 2015, I keep bringing up this timeline. I mean, I remember Paul Doherty and a bunch of other executives at Accenture going to Google's campus and going on like a driverless car just around campus, and how they're going to say it's just going to upend the insurance industry. But here we are 10 years later, and it still hasn't, right? And I think Paul's, and I agree with Paul, and I think you would agree too, AI, I mean, you need to be a consumer of AI if you don't want it to replace your job. Find a way to apply AI to your job and your life on a daily basis to make you more efficient and productive and participate with that change, right?
And what I think, and we never really went down this path through our discussion, but I think it emphasizes the importance of constant development, personal development. You have to stay on top of these trends, and you have to incorporate them into your day-to-day activity. I think the knowledge and education aspect of someone's career is going to be much more important going forward because of the pace of change, because of all these technologies. And I know I set for myself, I have a personal goal, 2 hours a week. I want to do something to learn some new skill. And I hit my team up hard with, you need to constantly be developing. You need to constantly be looking for ways to be better. If you don't, I think your skills do become outdated, and they do. It can happen quick. And if you don't take care and you don't figure out how to take advantage, you could be left behind in this new world.
Yeah, I 100% agree. I couldn't say that better, right? I mean, I think it's constantly the constant learning. I mean, any senior person that you've ever heard of, whether it's Warren Buffett or, the CEO, Arvind Krishna of IBM, right, or CEO of Accenture, Julie Sweet. I mean, they all talk about that, constantly evolving, learning, and taking on new skills, right?
Which is fun. It is fun. If you have the right mindset, it's a fun, but you got the day of sitting in a job and doing the same thing for 20 years, that's gone. Gone. Poof. But yeah. So, well, what else? What else do you have for me? The great discussion. I'll let him know that I love that book. I jotted notes down. I gave it to some of my team to take a look at. So, I really appreciated the read.
He has another one out, I think, as well. I don't know why I'm drawing a blank on it, but you should go see. I mean, he's got a bunch of videos out and speaking, videos that he's done recently around this topic, right? And it'll ease, if you've got teams that are really concerned about their job and their future, he does a decent job of, I think, a good job of explaining, how it's kind of your responsibility to embrace AI, and that's the mentality you should have, right?
And I love the way he calls that out, and you can see that as a common theme. And I know when I read, he even had a chapter specific to talent. So I think it it highlights the day of sitting by the wayside. I got my degree, I'm done. Oh, you may have had a degree, that's table stakes now. You got to constantly be finding ways to improve your skill set.
Yeah, many people are saying, with the new workforce and the demand and the technology that's out there, that a college degree might not even be worth it for everybody as well, right? So if you've got the ability to learn, consume knowledge, and go out there, there's something to be said. Is go out there and get your hands dirty and get going, right? So don't tell my kids that, because I really want them to go to college, but
me as well. Once again, we could have a good discussion. We're having that debate though with one of my children. Is college really the right thing for you? Yeah. Once again, parenting. We haven't touched on even parenting. How can AI help us parent?
Podcast is next hour. Yeah, that podcast is next hour.
Oh, okay. Oh, hour. We need more than an hour.
Yeah. Parenting. Just show up and try. That's the only advice I could give you.
You want this book on it? Throw it out the window, because it's not going to work. There's nothing. You got to just show up and listen.
Yeah. Anybody who gives you great advice about parenting doesn't know what they're doing, right?
Or doesn't have kids. They don't know what they're doing, or they don't have kids.
Yeah, they're raising dogs, not kids, right?
Yes.